Okay, so for today, I want to talk about the CTE for week 5, which was the required reading of Frankopan's chapter 1. And effectively, what these questions are designed to do is help you learn how to analyze a secondary source. So the first question is about his thesis, and you're supposed to quote it and give the proper internal citation for it with the page number. His thesis, and it's his thesis for the entire book, is stated on page 1. From the beginning of time, the center of Asia was where empires were made. If you read through all of chapter 1 or any of the preface point, which I think I also have with it, you know that Frankopan grew up and was trained as an historian, focusing on Western ideas and Western history. But over time, he came to realize that it was actually more towards the east, out of Europe, where things were actually happening through most of human history. And so that's basically what the premise of the Silk Roads is. It is looking at how central Eurasia really is the connecting point for all the points in the world. All right, so what sorts of primary sources does he use in this chapter? And he uses a lot. That's going to be one of the things about Frankopan. He's got at least one primary source on every page, if not more than one. Starting on pages 4 and 5, he's got Herodotus. He's got the cliff face of Behistun in its 3 languages on page 4. King Darius's palace on pages 4 and 5. The account of Cyrus the Great's death on page 5. Aeschylus, Dionysus, the account of Alexander's helmet from Plutarch, the accounts of Alexander's respect for Cyrus the Great and Darius from Quintus Curtius Rufus, Alexander's own words according to Rufus, the quote on the monument from Delphi in Afghanistan, tax receipts and documents in Greek, Ashoka's edicts in Greek, Buddhist visual images, stone altars of Tajikistan. Literally, and this is like pages 2 through 9 at this point in time. As you can see, many. I mean, just look at that. It's literally every page. And bear in mind, again, a primary source is something written in the past by someone who was there. So these are all accounts that he has had to go back and find and translate or read. I'm not sure he actually reads Chinese, but like the Chinese envoy to Rome, the Chinese report about the envoys to Persia, the Chinese account of the Samarkand peaches, Horace. I mean, this is just, there it is. It's all kinds of information from primary sources. All right. So then what are other sorts of evidence that he uses in this chapter? And for a lot of this is going to be secondary sources, and things such as that, like the modern scholars who dismiss Alexander on page 6. If you had read that and then looked at the note following it, you would see some of the names that he's using, that he was addressing there. The history of the Seleucids, the comparisons of Iliad and the Odyssey to the Ramayana and the Aeneid, the history of Rome. Again, sometimes you have to look at the notes to see if this is a newer history. Octavian's conquering of Egypt, the ancient apartheid analogy on page 16. Historians who argue that many Eastern rulers used gold and silver coins from Rome as their own currency. That's on page 17. Palmyra, called the Venice of the Sands, the emergence of the Kushan Empire, Trajan's death, the rise of the Sasanian Persia, the decline of Rome, and the creation of Constantinople. All of those were recountings of events that come from historians, not from primary sources. So those would be secondary sources. All right, so what is his explanation for the importance of trade in the ancient world? Why does he think it significant enough to write an entire book about and to call it a new history of the world? Well, first and foremost, trade motivates empire building, as he says on page 4. Trade flourished in ancient Persia, providing revenues that allowed rulers to fund military expeditions, targeting locations that brought yet more resources into the empire. Underpinning the commercial commonwealth was an aggressive military that helped extend the borders, but was also needed to defend them. That's on page 5. His discussion of Alexander the Great, looking to the east because of the power and wealth of Persia. The death of Alexander, all of these things are things you could have used to justify his view that trade was very important and that the center of trade was this Central Asian area. And again, almost all of these are quotes from the chapters themselves. Here you go. The last one, the Roman Emperor Constantine moves the heart of the Roman Empire east to the new city of Constantinople, which was at its heart Greek. So literally even the shifting of the trajectory of Western European history moves east to Constantinople. All right. What is Frankopan's bias and what evidence, and for this you must use quotes, do you have to support your assessment? Please give examples and proper citation, at least 5 to support. From the beginning of time, the center of Asia was where empires were made. Again, the thesis, and that's his bias. He's focusing entirely on the center of Asia. Greek commanders looked east with a combination of fear and respect, seeking to learn from the Persians' tactics on the battlefield and to adopt their technology. So even one of the civilizations that we consider to be part of the Greco-Roman Western historical tradition was looking more towards Persia and towards the east as well. When he, Alexander of Macedon, took the throne in 336 BC following the assassination of his father, the brilliant King Philip, there was no question about which direction the young general would head in his search for glory. Not for a moment did he look to Europe, which offered nothing at all. No cities, no culture, no prestige, no reward. For Alexander, as for all ancient Greeks, culture, ideas, and opportunities, as well as threats, came from the east. The linking of the steppes into an interlocking and interconnecting world was accelerated by the growing ambitions of China. So we have a new player on the field who's in competition, literally, with Persia. And somewhere that will be the end point of the Silk Roads. What made empires great were large numbers of cities producing taxable revenues. What made them culturally spectacular were artisans and craftsmen who developed new skills when wealthy patrons competed with each other for their services and rewarded them for their skills. It was unlikely that places like Britain would provide lucrative additions to Rome's territories. So again, he's definitely pushing back on the whole idea of the Western European-centric view of history. Rome's transition into empire had little to do with Europe or with establishing control across a continent that was poorly supplied with the kind of resources and cities that were honeypots of consumers and taxpayers. Rome's eyes were opened by the world it encountered in the East. China's dealings with Persia became regular and intensive. Rome's interest in and knowledge of the Far East was fleeting. Its eyes were fixed firmly on Persia. Seeing Rome as the progenitor of Western Europe overlooks the fact that it consistently looked to and in many ways were shaped by influence from the East. So he's very, very biased towards the idea that Western culture inherently has been heavily impacted by the East and by these Silk Roads and trade networks that went through those parts of Central Eurasia for thousands of years. Okay, so that's really kind of what I was looking for in terms of evidence that you could give to support your ideas if you did CTE for week 5, the analysis of this chapter. If you didn't do it, I encourage you to do one reasonably soon, because these are things you're going to need to be doing by the time you get to the annotated bibliography in week 10. Okay, so for this week, I'm not going to discuss today the discussion question, because I'm coupling week 5 and week 6, trade and war, together, because there are a lot of similarities with these two. The biggest difference for you will be in the evidence that you give me to support your ideas about war, since we'll be talking about different cultures and societies. We are, however, moving into the classical civilizations: Greece, Rome, Persia, Han China, These are all part of the classical tradition. And what we see with these is that these are societies that emerge by building bigger empires. Some of them are 2.0 empires, such as the Sasanian Persians. They are the second Persian empire after the first one, which was Darius and Xerxes and that group. This is where we begin to see more connectedness between these societies, and these societies becoming more monolithic and more culturally insular. And what I mean by that is that when we talk about the classical civilizations, you tend to see state religions and state ideas about how things should be done. They become a lot less tolerant and a lot more conformist because they need the unity because of their larger and larger empires with more and more people. So again, we will talk about this more as we get into this week's readings. The connections between trade and war. Again, war becomes even more spectacular, of course. Technology is changing. The classical civilizations develop new ways to do and to fight things. And this is going to be part of the difference between them and the ancient civilizations, and also between them and the post-classical civilizations, which is phase 3, which we get into around the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the fall of Han China, kind of at the end of this unit. So, all right. So for right now, that's what I wanted to do this coming week, week 6. You have either a discussion, which you dot post is due by Thursday, or you can do the CTE, which is due by Saturday, or you can do the quiz, which I will post in the next several days, and it will be due on Monday. And you can do any combination of these, but remember that for your final grade, I'm taking your top 5 discussion posts, your top 3 CTEs, and your top 2 quizzes. And those 10 things together make up 50% of your final grade. So you want to be sure that you are doing the things you need to do. With the quiz, you will have one opportunity to take it. There is no time limit on those, so you can take as long as you need to, but just be sure you plan for it, because once you leave it, you're out. All right. With all of that in mind, I will leave you now. If you have questions, email me, and I will try to get back to you as quickly as possible. Remember that week 7, not this week, because this week is week 6, but week 7, you have your preliminary list of sources due, and that is mandatory, and that is due not this coming Monday, but the Monday following. So hopefully you are on top of what you're doing. I will be getting those back to you in the next day or so that if there are problems, we can talk about it. But yes, coming up week after next, list of preliminary sources. All right. We'll see you on Wednesday.